Hello, welcome to our Wednesday program. This Wednesday anyway, who knows, next Wednesday we might all be dead. But it's this Wednesday's program, because it's Wednesday now, and the program is now. Therefore, this is Wednesday's program. Live if you're here now. And if you're not here now, well, you're also here now. It's just a different now. I'm not here now. I am, but a different me. The me that you're hearing is already dead. A new me has been born. Born and die. But we're live, and we're just talking about the value of a live discourse. And certainly there's a sense, a feeling, an interest, and a level of attention that is gained from a live interaction. Something is not live, it's less engaging. We feel less engaged by something that is pre-recorded. That's all psychological. The reality is you can gain the same benefit from a pre-recorded teaching if you can keep the level of attention, interest, and sincerity. Which is why I recommend when you're listening to a Dhamma talk, whether it's live or whether it's pre-recorded, that you take it seriously. You have some reverence for it. You know, before the advent of recording technology, the most common way to get a Dhamma talk would be to actually go to a monastery and engage in very formal interaction, in the sense of sitting often for an hour with your hands clasped to your chest, a reverential salute, sitting on the floor in a student position, enduring pain and cold and heat and fatigue, boredom, enduring desires and aversions and all sorts of things, and being very reverential and respectful. And so now people can listen to a talk in their underwear at home while they're eating or smoking or drinking or who knows what, playing games. I wonder if anyone plays video games while they listen to my talks. That would be bad. That would be irreverent. That would be disrespectful. Not to me, that's not so important. That's not important. To the Dhamma, to the Buddha's teaching. You know, you can do all those things besides drinking alcohol. That's something you should never do. But all those other things, unless you're a monk or a meditator at a center, you can engage in all sorts of things. No harm, no foul, but not while you're listening to the Dhamma. We should never be distracted when listening to the Dhamma. That's most important. Whether it's live or pre-recorded, that's just psychological. And that's not very powerful psychological. Most powerful psychological is your state of reverence. Most important. That is your state of reverence. And that can come from listening to anything. To come when reading Dhamma books. We treat Dhamma books like Buddha statues. Don't put your books on the floor. Don't put your shoes on top of your books. Don't treat them poorly. Don't bend the pages. So today is a Q&A session, which has to be done live anyway, so there's no... We could do pre-recorded questions, but it's not the same. I don't find that as useful. Yes, people can come back and get answers to their question. That's quite useful, but I think much more useful is answering questions people have now. Answering them right when they have them directly. Don't make them go looking for answers. Answer them. And I know the answers are shorter than they might be if I did a video on one question, but the benefit is that we can answer lots of questions. So this is about answering questions, and Shraddha is here again, kindly to ask them. And we'll just take this as a session to listen to the Dhamma and to speak about the Dhamma and to cultivate the Dhamma. So just close your eyes. Focus on the experiences in the present moment, the physical sensations, the feelings of pain or pleasure or calm, the thoughts, the hindrances, the senses. Remind yourself of what things are. Use the mantra to remind yourself, it is this, it is this. Pain, pain, thinking, thinking, feeling, feeling. When you have questions, just open your eyes, type them in. Close your eyes again. We'll try to get to them all. If there are questions about meditation, if they're not, well, we may not try so hard. If there are no questions, we'll just sit here, and we got about an hour or so. We take this as an opportunity to meditate together. Many people like that.
Bhante, someone is saying the volume is a bit low.
Ah, well.
So,
That's just the way it is. You just have to turn something up.
for me, it's okay. I could just listen on YouTube. Bhante, we have some questions. You're ready.
I'm not surprised.
The first question, it's not really about meditation, but someone stayed up till 2 a.m. to ask. So it's good. I just put it there. So it's 2 a.m. in my country where I live, and I wanted to stay up to ask this question. Is there life and death?
Well, that's not fair. You can't use a sympathy card to ask questions that aren't about meditation. I'm going to pass on that one, sorry. You should go to sleep, and when you wake up in the morning, do some meditation.
This question is, I think it's one of those that we didn't get to last time. They had asked this question last time. Going back to desires and trying to let them go. Should I not think about what will happen if I ever reach that state? What motivates you to live and do things once you no longer have desire?
No, you shouldn't think about what will happen. That's not how it works. You shouldn't even be trying to let them go. That's not what you're taught. Have you read the booklet? I hope that the booklet doesn't tell you to try to let them go. If it does, well, we may have to redo it. And it may not be perfect no matter how much we redo it. But let's be clear, we're trying to understand. Just like we're not trying to run away from suffering or escape suffering, we're trying to understand suffering. Same with the cause of suffering. It's really one and the same. You understand suffering, you also understand the cause. So put aside that idea of letting go of desires. Try to understand what's suffering, what is the cause of suffering. Unfortunately, desires are the cause of suffering, so you'll learn that. That's okay. Don't worry. But once you learn that something's the cause of suffering, why the heck would you? Well, you couldn't hold on to it. It isn't possible then to cling or strive for it.
Can I meditate with open eyes to avoid daydreaming?
Well, you've used a trigger word, avoid. You're trying to avoid things, you've got a problem. That's where your problem is. Problem isn't in daydreaming, the problem is in trying to avoid. Okay, daydreaming is a problem. But the reaction shouldn't be, oh, I wish I could avoid this. Reaction should be to be mindful of the experiences involved in daydreaming. See, there's not just the daydreaming, there's a trigger for it. There are triggers for it, and it's those triggers that you have to get skilled in catching. So no, you shouldn't try to avoid things. If you're daydreaming, there's a reason. There are causes for it, and there are results, and there's a whole process. And it's that process, the individual states involved in that process that you should be mindful of.
How can we deal with family disturbing us during our meditation without being dismissive?
So I think this falls in the category of questions I can't really answer. There is no, most questions that are worldly like this, because it is worldly. It sounds like a meditation question, but it really isn't. It has nothing to do with your meditation, this question. This question is about how to interact with other people, right? And there's so many factors involved, so many factors, that there isn't an answer. But meditation will help you see wholesome state, understand wholesome states, unwholesome states, and it will help you see the nature of your engagement with the world. So you'll see when you're doing things that cause suffering, and when you're doing things that are causing happiness, and so on. I can't give you an answer, there isn't one. But I can tell you that if you're mindful, you'll be able to see what you're doing wrong. So suppose something happens, and often, most often I think, or quite often, the worst thing is when you feel bad about something. Someone maybe reacts violently or negatively to something you did, and you feel guilty about it, even though you didn't actually do anything wrong. Because doing things is not actually wrong. It's not wrong to do this or do that. So suppose you awkwardly try to do something like, say, I'm meditating, and it comes off wrong, and the person gets angry. But actually, your mind states were pure. Maybe you were angry that they disturbed you, but maybe not. But suppose even if your mind states were pure, someone might get upset, and then you feel guilty and think, what am I doing wrong? Quite often, it's just because you're not clearly mindful of the reality of the situation. And the reality is you're getting upset over things you shouldn't get upset. Well, you should never get upset. So if you're upset about the way a situation turns out, And this could apply to anything you do. Something you do, something someone else does. If you get upset, that upset is just as much a problem as any negative mind states you might have had that caused the situation. You get angry at someone, they respond with anger back, you feel guilty. Feeling guilty is just another bad mind state. Well, I mean, guilt is hard to define because it means you feel angry at yourself. You feel angry at the situation, you dislike what happened, that sort of thing. You feel sad, that sort of thing. All of that is just more unwholesomeness. So I guess in short, meditation, and therefore the answers that I'm going to give, don't deal with such concepts as family and being disturbed. So let me talk about that in a second, being disturbed. But all of these things are conceptual, and the reality is, what are the mind states before it happened? What are the mind states when it happened? What are the mind states as it happened? What are the experiences? What's the reality? As far as being disturbed, I can offer a little bit of advice not to cling to the idea of being disturbed, because ultimately you can't be disturbed. Yes, we tell you should do so many minutes. You can try to explain to people that you have a schedule, whatever. But try to be careful not to get into the idea of being disturbed, because, well, learn not to be disturbed by being disturbed. Disturbed physically is not the same as disturbed mentally, and I guess I would just point out you have to be careful to see the difference.
How can I practice prostration? There's a video, so I just put the name of the video, but it's also in the book, right?
There you go.
Is observing something I can note. For example, observing the sensations in my chest or observing my body.
Well, that'd be kind of weird. If you have sensations in your chest, you should say sensing or feeling. If you have thoughts, you should say thinking. Would you really ever be observing the observation? The only way you'd say observing is if you were observing the observation. You can observe, or you can note knowing, because sometimes you become aware of something, like some situation or something. You say, "Oh boy, I'm really, I don't know, my maybe things are very acute. Like sometimes the senses are very acute, very striking, where your seeing is very vivid, hearing is very sharp. So then you know that, you're aware of that. You could say knowing. That's a common one.
Bhante, when I get angry, hurtful thoughts, I try to be mindful that it is just phassa, and any feelings of hurt, betrayal are simply due to the ego. Is this skillful? Any advice?
Okay, we're going to have to nip this in the bud. You be mindful of things that arise. You don't be mindful of something as something else. So if there's an angry, hurtful thought, mindfulness means you be mindful of that anger, that hurt, that thought. So if there's anger in the mind, being mindful means saying angry, or it's what arises out of saying angry, because then you're mindful of the anger. If there's hurtful, vindictive thoughts, you can note it's also anger, really. Anger-based. And then if it's just a thought, like if you think to yourself, I should kill this person or hurt this person, but sometimes that thought just arises as a stray thought because the mind is crazy like that, and there's no anger involved. Then it's just thinking. You don't have to worry. You don't have to be. Well, you should never be worried, but you don't have. It's not unwholesome. You just say thinking. But when you say try to be mindful that it is just something else, like you're saying, reminding yourself that something is something else, that's not mindfulness. that's intellectual retrospection or whatever. It can be useful. It's good to. It's about views, right? When you remind yourself that something is just phassa, that's cultivating right view on a conceptual level. It's not actually very deep, but it can be useful in the beginning to remind yourself of that sort of thing. It's just not mindfulness. It's not the mindfulness we talk about when we practice the satipatthana. And then when you say they're simply due to the ego, yeah, it's very intellectual, conceptual. Sure, it's potentially skillful, but I would advise you not to rely on that sort of thing. It's just a trick in the end. You're just trying to find a trick to stop yourself from having to deal with to face the thoughts, to face the experiences directly. It's very common in the beginning.
The Buddha stated to give up thinking like one's head is on fire. Are we, in an ultimate sense, expected to completely abandon thinking?
Okay, I'm going to question that. You find me a sutta where the Buddha said exactly like that. He may have. And ultimately it does make sense, but that's not, I think, what the Buddha said about one's head on fire. If one's head is on fire, if one has wrong view, one should give up wrong view as though one's head is on fire. I believe that's what he said. Wrong view is different from giving up thinking. So let's answer that, but putting aside what I think is a misquoting of the Buddha. May be wrong, but you show me. Let's put that aside. It doesn't really matter. Thinking, this can be answered on two levels. First of all, from a practical level, you will never give up anything. You observe and try to be aware. We are not trying to stop ourselves from thinking. So I can say that categorically. That is not the case. We are not trying to stop thinking, and that's important from a practical perspective. We're trying to understand thinking, and we're trying to see thinking as thinking. Vinyate vinyatamatang bhavisati. What is cognized should be understood as just what is cognized. And that means thought. It means any kind of mental activity. But on the other level, the level of a goal, right? Because the ultimate goal is freedom from suffering, freedom from samsara. And in Nibbana, there's no thinking, of course. But that's a whole other level. That's when the mind has let go of thinking. It's not that you give it up. You just let go. There's no more clinging, no more desire, no more suffering. And so if you look at it that way, you can say, well, yeah, but it's not just thinking. It's samsara. It's when the mind lets go of samsara.
How do we prevent ourselves from getting lost in thought for long periods of time? Or is this simply the nature of our mind?
Try and use proper grammar. I'm not picking on this question in particular, but you're all making Shraddha work here when she has to, and it shows potential lack of mindfulness and lack of reverence. So maybe you didn't think about that. This isn't critical, but just as a reminder, let's all try, when we write our questions out, to be thoughtful, to be conscientious. This isn't just, you see, think of this, think of how we engage with texts, when we text each other. We're very lazy. Tick, 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 you just put the text out there. That's not very respectful, which is fine, because if you're just close friends, nobody expects you to be. But this is different. You need a sense of reverence. You're asking a question about the Dhamma here. That should have some weight to it. When you ask a question of the Dhamma, normally, you want to ask a question of the Dhamma, you have to preface it with, please don't do this, but You would have to preface it, and you would have to hold your hands up to your chest, and the whole time you were listening to the answer, you would have to have your hands up to your chest. And when it was done, you might even have to, depending on the situation, you might have to bow down 3 times to the teacher, just to show your reverence that this was serious, that you're not just lazy, you're not just this isn't just a whim or something. Because really, no one owes you an answer. I don't owe you answers. I'll leave myself out of this. The teacher doesn't owe you answers. And so you're asking for a favor, and you're asking for a very big favor, a very deep and profound favor. You're asking for someone to teach the Dhamma. Normally, before a talk, you would have to recite, like in Thailand, Brahma cha loca dipati sahampati. You have to remind the teacher of how Sahampati Brahma came and asked the Buddha, and how the Buddha acquiesced because he saw that some people would understand it. And based on that, they say to dhammang anukampimang pajang, please teach the Dhamma out of compassion for this group of people. So let's, at the very least, try and be careful of our grammar, because it shows respect. And I'm not angry, I'm not upset about this. It's not something to get upset about, but just a reminder. It's helpful for Shraddha as well, because she has to read them all. So you don't prevent yourself from getting lost in thought. Part of that's part of seeing non-self, that you're not in control. What do you do about it? Because it's not an ideal situation for meditation, of course. Well, part of it is just chipping away at your habits, because that's just a bad habit that we have of getting lost in thought. And that will change. It will change once you start to see how stressful it is and how taxing it is on the mind. And we didn't realize before we started meditating that actually all the ordinary thought we engage in, it's suboptimal. We're not very much at peace when we do that. But a good way of approaching it, understanding it, is that when you realize you're thinking, thinking, of course, that's simple. But what you will try to verify is that you're able to catch the thought sooner. And that's a sign of progress, that you're able to catch it first. You can only catch it at the very end, after you've been thinking for a long time and the thought's finished. After some time, you can catch it halfway through. You find you halfway through the thought, you realize, oh yeah, this is not what I'm supposed to be doing with my mind. You say thinking. Well, it's not judgment, it's just you realize that you're thinking, and you remember to say to yourself, thinking. Sometimes, as you get better at it, you can catch yourself just when the thought begins. And that's when you know you're really getting the hang of it. But it's a skill. It comes over time. Have I scared people out of asking questions? I didn't mean to scare anyone. Please don't. Please give us a chance to do good as well. Both Shraddha and I are making merit, are doing goodness here. We're gaining great wholesomeness in our minds by helping you. So don't deny us that, please. And you're gaining wholesomeness by asking, so don't deny yourself that.
Sometimes I meditate when I go to sleep. I keep meditating for hours till 3 or 4 a.m. I finally sleep and I wake up at 6 feeling well. Is it dangerous?
No, that's great. It depends on, the only danger would be if you are engaging in taxing activities during the day. Because if you are, over time you'll find it's not sustainable. There's too much stress on the mind. But, it's much more about your level of mindfulness during the day. If you can stay mindful throughout the day, you'll find you need very little sleep, if any. If you get really into the mindfulness practice, you don't even need sleep at all. But that's not easy.
feel sensations in the same points every time I meditate. Should I note these sensations and go back to my breath? Focus on these thoughts.
Go back to your breath. Note them until they go away. If after a while the sensations don't go away, just ignore them. And then go back not to the breath, but to the stomach. Which is, I guess, what you mean, so it's just nitpicking. If your first language is not English and you're worried about grammar, please don't be. It's fine. Probably shouldn't have said it exactly like that, because a lot of people, English isn't their first language, so there's absolutely no reason for us to, absolutely no expectation that your grammar should be perfect if your language isn't English. So that's really something we can't criticize. Try your best, but don't be afraid.
This is not really about, it's just about how to keep time. It's not really about meditation, but can I add mindful prostration to my walking meditation time? Thank you so much for your teachings, dear Bhante.
So I'm not quite sure what you mean, but I think you mean before I do walking, can I add mindful prostration? If that's what you mean, then of course, yes. But if you mean instead of doing some of the walking, can I do mindful prostration and count it as walking meditation? I wouldn't do that. Don't take up your walking meditation time with prostration instead. Do the prostration first, then start the timer for your walking and then the sitting. It sounds like if that's the case, that you might not like walking meditation, which is a good reason to do walking meditation, because disliking is something you should work through.
I'm going to ask some non-meditation questions and then go back to the. As a married householder, is it possible to achieve freedom from suffering through meditation?
It's possible for anyone to achieve freedom from suffering through meditation, though perhaps not in this life. Most people, it's not possible in this life. It has nothing to do with being married or being a householder, though. I mean, certainly if someone isn't married and isn't a householder, it's much more likely that they'll be able to practice in such a way as to find freedom from suffering, but through meditation, but it doesn't mean that one or the other is always going to be better.
Is there such a thing as a high-quality meditation session? If so, how does that look like?
Well, meditation is more about the moments, as I've said other times. So the more quality moments you have, the more quality the session would be. But it's hard to judge. I wouldn't judge my sessions like that. Try to find moments of clarity, and they're going to be different. And your sessions should be different from session to session, from day to day, from week to week.
I know you ask about liking and disliking during the meditation course, and the more I think of it, can't every experience be thought of as liking and disliking to an unenlightened person?
No. I hope you mean liking or disliking, because you obviously can't have them both in the same experience. But neither is every experience liking or disliking. So, I mean, if you really want to know the answer to that, you have to study the abhidhamma to understand the different kinds of experiences that can arise. Some of them are liking, some of them are disliking, some of them are neither. But yeah, if you have a pleasant feeling, it's generally going to be liking associated with it. If you're not mindful, you see, without mindfulness, which is in all wholesome consciousnesses, then there'll be liking, there'll be disliking, or if it's a neutral feeling, there will be delusion. Lobha, moha, dosa. Lobha, dosa, moha. It'll be one or another. That's during the unwholesome state. And there'll be a lot of it. If someone's not enlightened, then yeah, there'll be a lot of liking and a lot of disliking. You might have to be vigilant about noting it. We usually go with what's clearest. If liking and disliking is most prevalent, then note that.
What is the goal of meditating?
To see clearly.
Someone else asking, is meditation a way to know yourself and the world better?
Yes.
Onto this question, I'm not sure about asking about you. Do you think meditation can cure things like bad eyesight? I noticed you wore glasses in the past.
No, you know what can cure bad eyesight? Laser eye surgery. That can cure bad eyesight. There are some illnesses that might be curable through meditation, but it would be very rare and very specific to an individual. I mean, I think I'm in the videos on how to meditate, I talked about how, because I was under the impression that it could cure things like cancer, but I think in certain cases maybe. I mean, there's lots of talk among meditators about it curing this or curing that, and I think in specific instances it could, and quite often it won't. People who meditate still die. They still have bad eyesight for sure. Ajahn Tong had cataracts. He had laser eye surgery, I think, a few times. All right, I see people answering questions in the chat. Please don't. That's not what this is about. If you're not asking a question, the chat isn't for chat. It's misnamed. The chat is only for asking questions. If you're not asking a question, you should have your eyes closed. You should be focused on the practice. We'll monitor the chat. You don't have to monitor it.
How do we face strong aversions to certain emotions and circumstances? I need to be patient and wait until I'm stronger and have more practice.
So with strong emotions, you can avoid them. You retreat, knowing I'm not ready to deal with this. Just try not to get in the habit of doing that. Because retreat, of course, is failure. It's just that failure isn't the end. It's okay, I failed, but maybe next time I'll be better at it. Maybe next time I will succeed. You should try to note. If you suppose you have a strong aversion, you should try to note disliking, or anger, or so on. But if you really can't deal with it, and if you end up retreating, try again. One of the things you have to realize is that you are strong enough, because there are no consequences of facing. There are no consequences of observing. Anger won't kill you. Anger will just boil. Well, it can be unhealthy and physically and mentally, for sure. But apart from that, just facing the anger, eventually you have to. You have to face it head on. And with mindfulness as a tool, we're much more powerful than we think, much stronger than we think. It's a skill. You have to work up to it.
What to do when you feel bored of meditating?
Well, you see, what would you do, Shraddha, when you feel bored of meditating? What should they do?
Note the boredom.
That means, you see, let's analyze this question so you can have an idea of how you have to shift your thinking, and how different it is to look at reality as a meditator than it is from an ordinary perspective. So we think when something happens, we have to do something about it, right? In meditation, when something happens, we have to understand it. So when you say what to do when X happens, understand X. So you're saying what to do when you feel bored of meditating, try to understand feeling bored of meditating. In fact, you can throw off the meditation part. It doesn't matter what you're bored of. What matters is, because that's not real. There's boredom, and you interpret that as being bored of meditation. In fact, boredom is not even boredom. Boredom is aversion. It's often triggered by a desire for something else. But there's a lot going on there. So you would note bored, or disliking, or if you want to do something else, say wanting.
Is it best to increase your meditation time or leave it at a set time?
You should try to both increase the time to a limit, to an extent. You wouldn't just try to indefinitely increase the time, but also increase the number of sessions you do throughout the day. So don't do one without the other. Don't just do lots of short sessions, or don't do one really long session. Try and balance those two factors out. And limit it generally to 1 hour walking, 1 hour sitting per session as a maximum. If you want to do more, do walking, sitting, that's fine. 4 hours. But, much better would be to spread it out throughout the day. So it's consistent, it's continuous.
How often should a lay person do Asubha meditation to get rid of lust?
Well, you can do it whenever, do it throughout the day. Do it daily. But it's not most effective. It's helpful to reduce it, but much more deeply effective is mindfulness. Mindfulness of the body especially. And watching the stomach rise and fall, watching the foot move, puts you in touch with the truth of the body. And there's no room for seeing it as beautiful or desirable.
Some of now are these are not meditation exactly, meditation questions, but the precepts. Is intending to break one of the precepts the same as actually breaking it? Would intending to kill a being but failing at it be as bad as actually killing the being? Why not?
It's impossible to say, because what do you mean by bad? What do you mean by same? Karma is the inclination of the mind. Not even inclination, the state of the mind. If the state of the mind is one of greed, one of anger, one of delusion, then that's unwholesome. But it's very hard to quantify or determine the badness of it, the level of badness. How bad is it? Which isn't a very useful question, I don't think. I mean, it's a quite common one, sort of one. And people are concerned, like, I wanted to kill something and I didn't. Is that still bad? Yeah, it's still bad. But what's bad is not the action or the relation to the action, it's the states of mind. That's where the problem is, so focus on those.
What I understand is meditation is at the stage of samma, sati in Eightfold Noble Path. Is meditation a shortcut to be at the stage of samma, sati, or do we have to go through all the stages of Eightfold Noble Path?
It doesn't work like that. The Eightfold Noble Path, in fact, the Eightfold Noble Path is a single moment. And it's describing the moment when the mind is perfect, when all 8 factors are perfect, when the mind is perfect. And there are 8 qualities in that sense. 8 qualities, the 8 path factors. But it's just a moment. Why is it a moment? Because technically, path means the thing that leads to the goal, and there's only one moment that leads to the goal. It's the moment before the goal. Before that, there's a lot of imperfection. So it's called the Pubbangamag, the preliminary, or the preliminary path. And at that point, there's all 8 factors are not perfect. So it's not about jumping from one to the other. We use sati because that's the most practical entrance to the cultivation of the path. Again, I wouldn't try to intellectualize it too much.
Bhante, these questions are, I'm not sure, I'll ask them and then you could decide. Can God be our object of meditation?
All right, so there's 2 reasons you might be asking this. 1, you might sincerely want to know the answer, and 2, you might be here to try to inject a different religious ideal into this session. If it's the latter, then really you shouldn't be here, and we'd appreciate if you just didn't come. But if it's sincere, well, it's a sign you don't really understand what we're doing here, or have any idea about who I am or what I do, which is fine. But I would recommend that you read the booklet on how to meditate, and I'm not going to answer beyond that. I'd appreciate if people tried to, we aren't open to other religious views coming in and injecting them. What we do has nothing to do with God, so if, and again, if it's sincere, if you are a person who believes in God and you're wondering, then, well, you should read our booklet because it's very, very different from what we do.
Does our meditative progress depend on our past karma? That is, all the experiences when we note from body, mind, feelings, and dhammas are all based on past karma.
Yeah, technically, well, it's complicated. This is a question that doesn't really matter. Why does it matter? What benefit do you get from getting an answer to that question? Not really much. So I would just let it go. It's the technical answer is complicated, and you really want to study the abhidhamma to understand the nature of what you're asking. But I wouldn't really encourage that. It's just a lot to take in, and it's not that helpful in meditation. I mean, it's the abhidhamma. The abhidhamma is incredible, and I've said this before. I recommend people to read the abhidhamma. Don't even worry too much about understanding it. Just read it or listen to it. Even you get a sense of how deep it is. That's a really good thing.
There's still non-meditation questions. You once mentioned sankara, loca in a video, the perception of reality. Is our perceptions of reality different for each person?
I think you didn't understand what I meant by sankara loka. That's not what sankara loka means. Sankara loka is the world. Loka means world with a K, actually. Sankara is formations, so that's experiences, really. Sankara are experiences. That's the meaning there. Is our perception of reality different for each person? Well, yeah, these are hard because they're English words, but we do react to reality differently. We do perceive, I guess, and conceive in regards to reality differently, because of course conceptions and I guess perceptions, whatever the word actually means, are totally mental, right? They're mental formations. But those mental formations are just as much formations as physical formations are. Physical are the same. They're all ultimately formations that you should be mindful of.
I believe it should be mankind's purpose to repel ourselves from suffering, rather than the material nature of most today.
So the word repeal, I don't understand what word you meant to use. I don't think that's the word you meant to use. Mankind's purpose to relieve, to free. I could go for that. Do you believe it should be our purpose, not just men, but women as well, and not just humans, but all beings? The best purpose is to free ourselves from suffering. But people engage in material pleasure, material desire, thinking that it will relieve their suffering as well. So really what we should be doing is engaging in observation to cultivate understanding, seeing clearly, so that we know what leads to suffering and what leads to happiness, so that we understand what is suffering and what is happiness. That's the real purpose and the best purpose.
When I sit to meditate and close my eyes, I get swayed by thoughts and feel drowsy. I can't distinctly tell what really happens, but I do realize that I start to conceptualize everything. Please guide.
I don't know if you've read the booklet on how to meditate. If you haven't, I would recommend our booklet. There's a link to it in the description. Should be in the description to this video. If not, it's on our website, sirimangalo.org. But all of those things are, well, the swaying, the drowsiness, the realization, any conceptualization, all of those can be objects of meditation. So you can note them as they arise. Find a name for them, remind yourself, it is this, just this, just this.
I see many different copies of the Abhidhamma online from many different authors. Is there one you suggest we read? Also, is there a difference between the Abhidhamma and abhidharma?
So I didn't mean to suggest you should read the Abhidhamma, but maybe I should, maybe yes, you should read. But I meant read the actual Abhidhamma, not someone's author, not something someone wrote about the Abhidhamma. So you talk about different copies by different authors. That's not possible. There's only one author of the Abhidhamma, and that's the Buddha. The abhidharma is often not written by the Buddha. It's something different. But the Abhidhamma, it's in Pali, so you could read the Pali. There's also, I think, second best to that would be to read the English, or whatever your language is, translation. The Pali Text Society has copies of very old translations, which are probably still worth reading. I don't know how far you'd get if you tried to read the Abhidhamma. It was kind of facetious, I don't know, tongue-in-cheek, not quite, kind of off the cuff. I mean, I don't really expect anyone to read the whole Abhidhamma, but no, it wasn't being tongue-in-cheek. It was just, the idea would be to read some of the Abhidhamma, to get a sense of it. Read the beginnings of the Abhidhamma. It's not the kind of thing you can really, well, it is the kind of thing you could really read, but you need some time. And you'd really have to repeat it. It's the kind of thing you would recite to yourself every day. Not because it has some intellectual value, but because it reminds you of reality. Abhidhamma is much less intellectual. In fact, I would say, the interesting thing, here's the interesting thing, I think I'm right in saying that the Abhidhamma is far less intellectual than the sutta. And yet, what is written about the Abhidhamma is far more intellectual than what is written about the suttas. How's that? Strange, huh? If you read the Abhidhamma, it's very unintellectual. It's just kusala dhamma, akusala dhamma, abhyagata dhamma. Wholesome dhammas, unwholesome dhammas, indeterminate dhammas. The intellectual stuff comes when you start to say, well, okay, but, right? Which has nothing. There's nothing in the Abhidhamma. Well, there's a little bit, but mostly there's nothing about but, what about, or explain this. It's very unexplained for the most part. I mean, I haven't read the whole Abhidhamma, but I've studied it, and the studies can be very intellectual, some of them. Whereas the Abhidhamma itself, you read it and it's a whole different feeling. It's just a recitation of reality. That's not maybe entirely fair. I mean, there is some explanation in it, but the way it's explained is still very matter of fact. Anyway, any other meditation questions before we go?
Yes, there's one. The other one I'm not sure.
All right, we'll take the one you're sure of.
Bhante, my practice is not consistent, so is my motivation. Could you please advise how I can foster motivation, energy, and commitment to learn and practice Dhamma in a consistent manner?
practice. It's all just practice. Don't look for a shortcut. I can't give you advice that's going to make it easier. If it were easier, you wouldn't gain as much from it, so it wouldn't actually help you. There's no way, There's no way through but through. There's a saying like that. There's no other way but through, something like that. You can't go around. You can't go around the problem. Mindfulness, what is the quality of mindfulness? Abhimukha. What is the word? Not abhimukha. Whatever. It means to facing the Dhamma, facing reality. Risaya bhimukha bhava. It's the nature of facing the realities, facing your experiences. That's what mindfulness is about. Not fighting, not fleeing, facing. Try and face the moments. Moments when you're not meditating, try and face them as well throughout your day. A big support for formal practice is informal practice, where you're mindful throughout the day when you're eating, saying to yourself, chewing, chewing. When you're walking, saying walking, walking. When you're standing, sitting, lying, seeing, hearing. When you're liking and disliking. When you're thinking. All right, I'm going to go with that. And you put up the closing sadhu. It is good. Thank you all. I appreciate again your interest and your thoughtfulness and your conscientiousness in engaging in a respectful manner with the Dhamma. It is good. May you all be happy, well, and free from suffering.